What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the 2 Game Podcast, where I'm continuing my review and recap of Season 1 of Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We are here to review and recap episode number 10, Donnie Goes Deep. Shout out to that. So I'm just going to say this beforehand, before I even jump into the review and recap of this episode. I think out of the 12 episodes, I've seen them all. This is by far the weakest episode out of them all. I was just not a fan of this particular episode. I don't want to sit here and say that I just hated the episode. It was kind of like, okay, this is fine. Like, it's definitely the weakest in terms of giving us quality comedy on top of some great action sequences. But the biggest issue with this episode is the fact that I don't feel like it really pushes the story forward. It feels like one of those filler episodes, and it sucks because I kind of wish that Donnie really didn't get justice in this season. His first episode was more of like a Jason Bourne, a chase sequence style episode. We didn't really get to really hone in on his personality a little bit more and get him with interacting with other characters per se. And they paired him with Wingnut in this episode, and I feel like Wingnut is more of the focus in this episode. And I think that was it was a big miss on my part. So Donatello and Wingnut are on their way to fix the sewer's power supply when Lee the Eel dashes through the sewer tunnel, forming a hole that plunges them into the lower levels. They notice rising water and an alligator, which they assume to be a demutated Leatherhead throughout the entire episode, which was pretty funny. Like, every time they talked to this alligator, they called it Leatherhead. But after clashes with the alligator, Donatello tries to connect with it, still thinking it's Leatherhead. But then eventually the real Leatherhead arrives, revealing the alligator they are fighting is different. So Donatello, Wingnut, and Leatherhead together take care of the alligator and an additional one on top of that. The trio head for the exit and end up running into Raphael, Scumbug, and Ray Fillet. And in a flashback side story, the East River 3 devise a plan to retrieve the giant pearl that was taken by humans from their East River home. Goldfin decides to ask the crime boss, Bad Bernie, for help. So, like I said, the whole episode is kind of focused on Wingnut here. And they're using Donatello to kind of, like, he's not necessarily fighting the villains, okay? Like, he's fighting the alligator, sure. But he's more so helping Wingnut overcome her anxiety. But he's more so there to help Wingnut overcome anxiety. Because every 5 seconds, Wingnut is freaking the hell out in this episode, cowering behind the wings and just anxious about everything. And Donatello's there to be that sweet, soothing voice and to kind of help Wingnut along the way, right? Just to me personally, I don't think I really gravitated towards that relationship at all. And I think they do a decent job of developing that over the course of those 22 minutes. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that they did a terrible job. I just personally don't relate a lot to it, and I didn't find any of it really funny, which is why I go to the Ninja Turtles. But on top of that, the flip side, I will say that I do like how they're tackling different issues with the Turtles in this particular episode. It's kind of an experimental episode of sorts. Like, I love the fact that they're tackling anxiety in this episode, whereas they haven't done that with any of the other episodes. So personally, Wingnut is just not my favorite character out of all the mutants. I think she might be my least favorite. But again, kind of put all that to the side. I think there are some funny moments throughout the episode. And my biggest issue is they don't really use one of the East River 3 in this episode. They make Donatello and Wingnut and Leatherhead fight 2 alligators, just random alligators in the sewer. And I personally just feel like we didn't need a filler episode. I think you could have devoted some of this episode to, I don't know, maybe adding one more mutant into the mix, or even just like, even if you want to go with a side story or a side mission, kind of like this episode is, why does it have to be just a regular alligator? Just go with a different mutant and just make it just a normal side quest. I just didn't find the alligator to be very engaging for the story. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a terrible episode, because it's not. I'm indifferent about it. I nodded off a couple of times watching this episode. It is definitely the weakest episode out of the 12 in season 1. But Y'all let me know in the comments below if I'm right, if I'm wrong. What did you think about episode number 10? And I will catch y'all next time on another review. Laters.